הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבשחים גם יוחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבשחים גם יוחד.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. So as you hopefully know by now, I am very passionate about Jewish character development. And the core text of Jewish character development is a book called Mesilat Yesharim, a book called The Path of the Just, written by someone who's called the Ramchal, an 18th century Italian rabbi, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. And if you were to open that book and go to the first chapter and go to the first sentence of the first chapter, it would say in Hebrew, but I'll say it in English: the foundation of piety and the root of perfect service is for a person to clarify and come to realize as truth what is their obligation in their world and to what they need to direct their gaze and aspiration in all that they toil all the days of their life. So in easier English, step one, clarify your obligation. What's your obligation? What's the larger mission? Step two is clarify your personal mission. And step three is look at yourselves and what tools you have and try to accomplish that mission. And I'm very excited about my guest today, Archie Gottesman, because even though this is my first time sitting with her, my sense is that she's doing that. She's someone who has a skill set that she has brought to the table, a background she has brought to the table, and has decided to make a major shift in her career to focus on using her skills to serve and help the Jewish people and doing what she does best to apply that. And that is really exciting for me. So Archie is the co-founder of an organization called JewBelong, a nonprofit. You may recognize them. She'll say a little bit more about what they do more broadly, but probably you know them best from these massive pink billboards that are all across America with phrases that predate October 7th and phrases that have since October 7th, and we'll talk about those as well, with statements like, let's be clear, Hamas is your problem too. And can a billboard end anti-Semitism? No, but you're not a billboard. Very catchy phrases that really catch people's eyes. And every time I open some kind of social media, I'm scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, someone is posting one of these billboards that they saw. And we are, of course, in Times Square, where I know there have been billboards as well. But before that, before she was doing JewBelong, and she'll share a bit about that, she served more than 30 years as an executive vice president and chief branding officer at Edison Properties and its multiple entities. So she has this long career in sharing ideas with people and trying to move them. And of course, probably also most famously to our audience is the Manhattan Mini Storage iconic billboards, which are all over the city that are sometimes edgy, sometimes more than edgy, but certainly capture your attention. Things like, I think the one I saw, I was on the FDR on Sunday for Father's Day, and it said, store old things here, not the White House. And that had a picture of our two presumptive presidential nominees, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Trying to encourage people to laugh first and also to do their storage. So it's very exciting to have you here. Archie, thank you so much for coming on. Let's just start with, before we get into the work that you're doing now in JewBelong, just tell us about yourself. I know you come from a philanthropic family. Tell me from the beginning a little bit of how you were raised and why you care about this stuff.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here. I was brought up in New Jersey in a conservative Jewish home, like the very typical Hebrew school on like Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then Saturday junior congregation, and never went to Jewish day school. I'm one of four girls, and my three sisters did go to Jewish day school. We moved during part of it. Like there was a meaning like, why didn't I go? Yeah. It was just one of those things. And that always made me honestly feel like the least Jewish member of my family, which I think is a little bit of my superpower as the years have gone by, because I mean, by the way, that was completely my thing. No one in the family, I don't think, but like if there was a, let's just say Passover Seder, and there was like going heavy on the Hebrew, well, I wasn't studying Tanakh or whatever, or it doesn't, like, the Hebrew wasn't my forte. Mm-hmm. So I was always, at a very early age, felt like, okay, I get what it feels like to be a little bit out of this inner circle. Mm-hmm. And so anyway. But
so how do you just felt out, or you're saying using that story?
I don't know, like half the people at probably most Passover tables, when you've got 15 people there and 7 of them are singing and the rest of them are sitting here like,
yeah.
like, oh God, they're going to do every verse.
When's the food
like,
coming?
And I'm not saying that that's like, I get it. Like, I think that is a path that Jewish people need to walk and figure out, like, is it important that everyone at the table knows the word to the song? Is it more important that we sing, every verse of, maybe it is important that everyone sings, in Hebrew, even though most people don't know it and can't follow along, or some. It's just, I'm highly sensitive to that. And I opt to say, like, okay, I want most people at my table to be able to follow along, not 100%, but most. So anyway.
You felt outside.
I felt like I was the one who didn't know all the verses. Okay. It's literally, I want to like teach this to every Jewish person everywhere. Like, are you talking to most of the people? And if so, that's great. Are you talking to only a select few at your table? Well, okay, that might be okay, but just consider that as you're conducting your Jewish experience, and how do you want to bring people in versus maybe not bring them in.
And you're saying for a Jewish, whatever it is, an organization, a entity, a project, to be thinking about serving the Jewish people, noticing how far, like, who can follow along and how close they are. And even in your case, you're growing up in a family, attending conservative day school, but you're the one of the 4 siblings that's not.
I didn't go to day school. I went to public school.
So
I went to Hebrew school. My education.
What's their plan for you? Are they interested in you or not, is what you're saying? Okay, keep going.
Yeah, but this is like, I know we're going to talk about so many other things, but like this to me it's such an important like nugget to, I know that your audience may be way more observant but
everything. We have
everybody. We have
each of the 4 children in our audience, and the ones who aren't.
I feel like I am like the watcher I am like always on the lookout for, we call them at JewBelong, the organization that I started, we call them disengaged Jews. And for short, we call them DJs.
Okay.
And those are the DJs are, for our Joyous Judaism, they are our target audience. And they're the people who, like, they really might go to the office on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or what have you. And I used to be like, annoyed at DJs. I'm like, how can you be going to the office on Rosh Hashanah? It's freaking Rosh Hashanah, right? But after starting JewBelong and really realizing, it's not a matter of being frustrated with them. It's just, let's make Judaism, maybe there's nothing that brings them into shul. Maybe there's no reason that they feel like they have to take the day and celebrate the holiday. Yeah. So let's meet them no matter where they are in their Jewish journey, even if it's the very beginning, and give them some reason to come in and feel like, oh my gosh, we need you. We need everybody, no matter where they are on their Jewish journey, and make them feel welcome.
So I hear you self-analyzing a little bit, that perhaps why you're drawn to helping
totally
that crowd
self-analyzing,
because you felt like a bit on the edge of being a DJ growing up. Okay.
I think Judaism is an incredibly inspiring religion, and we're. Can I just give you an example of like going to the Rosh Hashanah thing? Okay. So, nothing against synagogue. My husband and I were members of 2. We're always at least members of 2 synagogues. But I do think that there is, sometimes people go to synagogue and they don't understand it because, it's in Hebrew and this and that. And that's fine. I get that. But I'll talk to JewBelong Jews, as I might call them, or DJs, and they'll say, well, I never go to synagogue. Oh my God, I only go if someone makes it so boring or whatever. Yeah. I'm like, well, what if I told you that I'll use Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, I'll use the high holidays. Yeah. I'll say, what if I told you that it's not about listening to something that you don't understand for 3 hours and wishing you could check your phone or something? What if I told you it was about reaching out to people in your life that you love and saying, hey, are we good? Mm-hmm. Like, I know we had that argument a few months ago and I know we made up, but like, you just mean a lot to me and it's a new year and I just want to make sure that like we're starting this new year, like that we're really clear. And by the way, I'm going to apologize again for what I said because I know I apologize, but like I mean it and you mean a lot to me. And then, and just starting this year on this, just like with a clean slate. I was like, what if that's what it's about, is like important conversations with people in your life. And they're like, oh, that's what Rosh Hashanah is about? I never knew that. And I'm like, I know, because we don't necessarily explain. So it's about mining. JewBelong is obsessed with sort of mining Judaism for such beautiful values and richness, and that's just a hobby to do that, almost like, and explaining it in really simple language so that people who may not have had any Jewish education say, well, that's a really good idea. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't think of it. The rabbis thought of it.
The treasure's waiting for you. Wait, so tell me, so I want to hear about that JewBelong more deeply, but tell me a little bit. First of all, I know your parents are well known. Your father, may his memory be a blessing, Archie Gottesman, and your mother, Paula. Tell me a little bit, I mean, to the outside world, they're philanthropists who have helped people, but tell us a little bit more about, like, how did they model that for you in the home? What you must have saw some commitment to the Jewish people through that, or what were like as parents? Just a little bit of on the inside of that relationship first, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my parents they brought us to Israel a bunch of times. I mean, I don't know, probably went 7 or 8 times before I even went to college. Maybe not, Yeah. And we, as I said, Hebrew school, we grew up in a home where we always had Shabbat dinner, and it was a kosher home. Like, I think people have like different styles of kosher. So, with 2 sets of dishes, but we use the same frying pan, and same like ladle. So who knows, whatever. So, but yeah, Judaism.
Was there a sense of service or obligation that came from them? Like, you see them getting involved in these causes, like.
Yeah, my parents were very philanthropic. I mean, my dad sort of was the ultimate kind of American dream in a way. He and my uncle started with a parking lot in 1956 that my grandfather thought that parking would be a very good business. Okay. So they had a parking lot in Newark, New Jersey, and they parked cars. And they parked cars at one lot, and then they were able to get 2 lots. And I was in that business for a very long time, as you mentioned. And so I'd say as the years went on, being able to be philanthropic was something that was important to my parents. But I didn't grow up that way. I think it was always important, but they, as monetary success, theirs grew. Right. They were able to give more back.
Got it. Did they have a thesis? I know today all foundations are like, I want to make this impact versus that. Was it this serve the Jews, help Israel, help the arts? Like, what did you take away from that?
I think it was mostly serve the Jews and then education. It was always an important part. Day school was their thing.
Got it.
And Israel, and different
Jewish
different
education
aspects.
in Israel.
Yeah, I would say that
Beautiful.
was kind of the biggest.
Okay, fine. And then all right. So now tell me how you end up like the marketing whiz. What's that path?
I went into the family business.
Okay.
I did also park cars for a while, and it was like the perfect storm because we were in the storage business in addition to the parking business by the time I went into the business, and I had billboards all over Manhattan. We're only in Manhattan, but you can still have a lot of billboards. And I started telling people to rent storage, but to be perfectly frank, storage is a commodity. Like, we might have better rates or our hours might be longer, but in the end of the day, you're still renting a room to put your stuff in. And so I was like, oh God, this is so boring. Like, if I'm gonna tell you for the next 30 years that my storage is safe and secure, I'm gonna be bored. My customers might be bored too, so I started using humor as a way to just get New Yorkers to look. And like one of my favorite, and it didn't necessarily have to do with storage, but as an example, one of our billboards said, like, we hear New York has 4 other boroughs, cool. Because like Manhattanites, they want to be in Manhattan.
Sure.
Or, New York has 6 professional sports teams and also the Mets. And like, you'll fit right in Connecticut. Or New Yorkers have more to talk about than big sodas. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a time when Bloomberg was trying to outlaw big sodas. Yeah. So I had this very fortunate space of being able to just talk to New Yorkers.
Sure.
And it was like funny and kind of sassy. And we had another Bloomberg one that said, Bloomberg's gone, you can put your bikes back in storage, because he had his bike lanes. Anyway, so we just I could say stuff as long as we sold storage.
Right.
And we did, because most people saw our billboards or they saw our advertising on subways. And so when they've needed storage, they'd be like, they are like, what, you know, they call Manhattan mini storage. And this is kind of back in the day where people were calling instead of, and then of course, you know, website,
Sure.
you know, and renting storage. So I learned that, and this is a lesson that I was able to bring with me into JewBelong, I learned that you can talk to people about what they're thinking. Like if the New Yorkers are thinking, you know, another one is New Yorkers like accepting of your ideas, judgmental about your shoes. Because New Yorkers, like, we're so, you know, oh yeah, everything's fine, but like, oh my God, look at his shoes. Like, so they would like laugh and they would get that. And I've been able to do the same thing as I transitioned to Judaism. It's like, talk about what they're thinking. And if you can use humor, all the better. And because, yeah, very short, it's almost like Twitter before Twitter was Twitter.
Right.
Or before it was X.
Right, but it's a specific approach, right? You're not trying to get out, like you said, advertising that you have longer hours or you have a better location. You're really focusing on saying something that people connect with immediately. That it's almost like you're having a conversation with them on the subway.
Yeah, and because you're so like there are too many things coming at you all the time. So unless my billboards are really catchy and short and like hopefully relevant,
right,
you're not going to look at them because you're looking at your phone and you're looking at the other signs and you're looking at everything else. And if you're driving, so it's like a big contest for like 1 second of your brain. That's really how advertising, but specifically outdoor awareness advertising, which are billboards, that's how they work. It's like, I want to be really quick and sharp, and then people say, oh, look at that. I remember that. That's billboards.
Wow. And what about, we'll get to this about JewBelong, but let's start with it with Manhattan Mini Storage. How do you track success when you're putting out billboards like that? How do you know which ones are working or not working? Are people calling up and being like, I saw the joke about Bloomberg, I'd like storage, right? You don't have that kind of data.
No, there's usually, I've been doing this for so long,
Yeah.
so sometimes I just know. I was like, that's a great billboard. Like, I just know it's going to be. Yeah. But that's not, you're talking about like specific impact. With the storage, the way we sort of got, when we put out a new campaign, there would almost be like, people would often email about it or just like say, I saw your storage and things like that. We usually had a specific sale. So with business, it's easy. 25% off, third month free.
Right.
That was really
that's
like
on the bottom of the billboard already. Okay.
That's and then people would check that. And there was just also like we had 17 locations. People would just kind of talk about it. There was a certain once in a while it would get written up in media, but normally it was about the press the sales. Right. And to answer the same question for now with antisemitism, with JewBelong and just JewBelong, it's really about visits to the website and engagement online and press. So all those ways, and then there's organic, because you said that when you're open, you said that sometimes like you'll be on your social media and you'll see it. Now, I'll never know, unless people tag JewBelong and they don't tag us always, I'll never know that you saw JewBelong in someone else's feed. But that's organic advertising. Right. So there is a certain, there is some lack of like, oh my God, I know exactly how many people showed up for synagogue yesterday because we were able to count them when they showed up. It doesn't have that. And I think the Jewish community needs to get a little more used to, hopefully I think we get used to not being able to count everything, but knowing that there is an effect of people, that it's very, very, very effective anyway, even if you can't count the person who said, oh, I'm not anti-Semitic anymore.
People, I think, know it extra now because there's focus on Israel and Judaism and anti-Semitism anyway, and the pink billboards around anti-Semitism, but it predates all of that. So tell me a little bit, how does JewBelong come to be?
Yeah.
And let's start from the beginning.
Okay, so I actually, it comes to be because when I met my husband, Gary, and he converted to Judaism. And he converted because we fell in love, and I said it's very important to me. It was just important that I was going to marry somebody Jewish, and that was going to be it. So it was a relatively undramatic story. His parents were really nice, like it's just, in terms of his conversion. But there was a little part. He's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna to do this. Gary went to the Naval Academy, so he was actually running a nuclear submarine and was studying with a rabbi in different places. And he did say, well, tell me why is it so important? I know your family's Jewish, I know it's part, but like, and there is something when someone says to you, why is it so important? Like, sure. Not just like, of course it's important, look at me, but like, why? Because it's the values, it's an anchor. In this crazy world, being Jewish is like, oh, I know who I am. Like, I know it gives me like roots, and it also kind of tells me how to live in this world. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a really important exercise for anybody. And sometimes I think that being, falling in love with Gary sort of made me sort of vocalize that and really think about that a lot. Anyway, so then he converts to Judaism, and we end up living in New York City. He had gotten out of the Navy, and I was always trying to get Gary to love being Jewish. I want to be really clear about this. He converted, he was like all in, but I wanted him to like love it in here. Like, I was like, so like we went to Israel, and we spent like a long time in Israel, and then we lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, like Jew Central, right? Like, and we would go to maybe we'd go to a Shabbat service, and we would leave, and I would always be like, so it's better than that, and we'll go somewhere different next week, and he's like, yeah, but that was fine. I'm like, it was fine, but it wasn't like, it didn't make my heart beat. It didn't like, and so I always really felt like Judaism is it's so fabulous, but it doesn't necessarily sell itself well. And I really felt like also having a rookie, like Jews are always complaining about our numbers, because rightfully so, people try to kill us, and they do kill us. So here I have this new Jewish person who's smart, amazing, the whole thing, like this. I got a new one, and I felt like, wow, we need to be as a community just better, just more equipped and really open-hearted to listen to someone at a very beginning of their Jewish journey. And by the way, it's not about people who choose Judaism. They're usually easier because they've been motivated to do this.
They're going that direction.
We have a huge issue with people with no Jewish education. Right. They feel so left out, and I just think it's nobody's fault per se, but I think that there's like an entire market of DJs that we could add so much to our community. It's just they feel, we have another word at JewBelong, it's called Jew-barrassed. They feel Jew-barrassed. They feel like, here we go again. I'm gonna feel like less of a Jew than you, because you're wearing a yarmulke and I'm not, and she keeps kosher and I don't. And they already feel like a bad Jew.
I'm a bad Jew. It's like the most common
phrase. It's the worst. And so I'm very interested in, so starting JewBelong, I was like, there is this tremendous audience, and you name the Jewish organization and I'll tell you that I don't think that they're really hitting the DJs. Right. They might be trying, but it is so difficult to find DJs because they're not joining our Jewish institutions. They're the people who walk right by Hillel. No matter what campus you're on, they're just doing their life. They're going to play lacrosse. That's my best example. Like, they're playing lacrosse, they're playing soccer, they're doing what they're doing. They're not doing Jewish. And so we would find them, when I started JewBelong, with the billboards. And the same, so I basically took my skill from storage and transferred it to Judaism and tried to do things, and like one of our billboards that has gotten a lot of attention is, so you eat bacon, God has other things to worry about. And people see something like that, and we have a lot of different ones, but they say, oh, you get me. And then they go on our website, and then they use our resources.
Got it. So I want to talk about both of those. So first,
sure.
It's a similar model. You're saying you decided that you wanted to switch over. You're going to launch JewBelong to get the disengaged Jews.
Yep.
If I understood correctly, it's because most of the orgs that say they're serving the broader Jewish audience, at the end of the day, it's a little bit of an inside club. There's the people that are super literate, and there's the people that are medium literate, but someone who lives not in New York or LA, let's say, or Chicago, and some of them are in New York, LA, and Chicago as well, who really has no connection and no awareness of, you wanted to attract those people and move in this direction. And you're saying the first line of defense that you put out there, or the first line of offense, I should say, is billboards with a similar theme to what you said around Manhattan Mini Storage. Again, the example you gave is a perfect example. So, you might meet someone in college and be like, I eat bacon, I'm a bad Jew. Right? And you're saying, I know you eat bacon, and
you're not a bad Jew.
Don't worry about it. I think I saw another one of yours. What was one of them? Something about marrying someone. Something about getting married and not going to hell?
Yeah.
What is it?
Judaism, come for your girlfriend, stay for the lack of hell. And, oh my gosh, get
for
it.
Your girlfriend, stay for the lack of hell.
Or come for your boyfriend, stay for the lack of hell. We had both out there. And I get it. Not everyone likes those. But, who does like them are the DJs.
Right.
And they're like, that's hysterical.
Right.
I was like, I know.
Right.
And if the people who don't think it's funny, it's like, okay. You're probably not my target audience. And when's the last time we all found something that everyone likes? Never, right? So it's like, okay, but the target audience, I know, I love that statement because the people who get it think it's so funny. And I think, 74% of Jews in America are marrying people who are not Jewish. I mean, that's a high number, okay? So instead of looking at that as oh God, that's the most horrible thing in the world, JewBelong looks at it and says, look at all those opportunities.
Right.
Look how many people.
Right.
We need a bigger team. I'm looking for team members. Sure. I want people to be, proud Jews. And if they're coming into this, then I want them to feel like, great, we are so lucky to have you, and boy, are you lucky to have found us. Right. And that's it. So yeah, and if they see it on a billboard, we get a lot of people who the interfaith, well, not really interfaith, or even people who are not Jewish but leading a Jewish life, like raising Jewish children. We have a lot of those are part of our audience too, and who use our resources.
Right. It's interesting, by the way, to me that the two examples we gave are both theological, because actually I would say that most of what's going out there about Judaism is not so theological. Even when we're doing all these different organizations, it's like come to a Shabbat dinner, or it's like be in community. There's not so much focus. And the two examples we gave, one is God doesn't care about bacon, which I know that you're not teaching theology, but you're entering them in a God conversation, which I feel like is less common in the Jewish world. And the other one, raising hell. No one talks about hell at all in the Jewish world. So it's just very funny that in some ways almost I would argue that God caring and hell are almost less common questions in the Jewish world. And so you're like you said, you're reaching people where they are, where maybe in the broader world, when you think of religion, you think of what does God care about my behavior? You think about what happens when I die. Whereas maybe in a typical Jewish setting, those won't even be the first 20 things you discuss with someone when introducing them to Judaism.
Interesting. But remember, I only have my 2 seconds with someone seeing a billboard.
Oh, it's great. I love it.
So I got to be I don't have time to waste. If they see the billboard and then they go on the website, it's all a matter of getting them onto the website. And I do have just, this is what we've got. This is these are our different booklets. We have our Passover Haggadah. We have Shabbat, high holidays. I was mentioning that before.
Wow.
Yeah, and the readings are so good, and Thanksgiving, because not everybody, because maybe that's a gathering, but let's add some Jewish.
Right. I see it says extremely fabulous, mildly Jewish.
Yeah.
Just lean into it.
Because it's exactly. And then Hanukkah, we have some skits. And what if it's just a life cycle event? So we have a baby naming, because sometimes people are a baby naming, or maybe I had a circumcision, the baby had a circumcision in the hospital, and I don't know if we're going to do a bris because I don't know any rabbis, and da-da-da. I was like, okay, well, or baby naming is a better example, because let's here, you personalize it, and it's beautiful readings. And it's funny, my co-founder, I have a co-founder of JewBelong, her name is Stacy Stewart. And we only knew each other because we were working together at Manhattan Mini Storage. And she was brought up, 2 Jewish parents, ultimate DJ in a way.
Yeah.
2 Jewish parents, just didn't go to Hebrew school. She grew up in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And her husband, kind of similar, DJs, but 2 Jewish people who married each other. And she tells this beautiful story how she came to my oldest daughter's baby naming, Simchat Bat, in New York. And it was so beautiful. I mean, there probably wasn't a dry eye in the entire apartment. Sure. We had a huge, and it was just, and she says she was leaving and walking to the elevator with her husband, Greg, and she said, I don't know what that was, but I want that in our lives. And it's just like, okay. And it's just like, so many of Lily's almost 30 now. The readings are all in the JewBelong baby naming booklet. And all we do, I don't mean to say it's nothing, it's a very big, it's a heft, but we're very, very good at collating and we're curators. We curate all of these fantastic blessings and readings, and we put them in, and then people don't have to kind of search for themselves, and they download, and it's all free.
It's our first time sitting, but are you getting emotional a little right now?
Yeah, because it's like, it is, it makes me a little sad because people don't realize, like, again, Judaism they don't realize the joy in it. It's like, oh my God, to not have a baby naming, to celebrate like a miracle of a Jewish baby, like, that's of course we want to do that. Another quick story, I was at a baby naming in, it was a bris, an apartment full of disconnected Jews. And there was this moil. And he goes like, all right, it's a covenant, and there's grandfathers hold the baby, and and we're going to do this, and and anyway, like, and there's more bagels in the kitchen. Right. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I was so frustrated because I was like, we are celebrating like a covenant, like thousands of years, baby boys have been had to be circumcised, and this is like a mitzvah. And the most inspiring thing you're telling us is that there's more bagels in the kitchen. Like, and this was an apartment full of DJs. This is before I started JewBelong, by the way. And I started being like, we need to do a better job of inspiring. If it's a Jewish thing, we need to leave them inspired. Right. And that's it. And like, that needs to be, if that's our low, that's our bar. Maybe not every time, it might not get, but like, we have to try to inspire, because who knows the next time those DJs are going to get together for a Jewish thing. Right. It's fine. It goes back to your experiences with Greg, kind of like when you bring him to something for the first time, you want him to be wowed, and if he's not wowed, it feels disappointing. And I think another way you might talk about that is sometimes I don't know what you call the opposite of a DJ, but people that are more in the inner circle. Are apologetic sometimes, right? So you have that rabbi coming to a situation, and he's like, "Oh, these people don't want me to be here, so I'm just gonna or the mohel. Let's just get through this because the vibe I'm getting from them." Interesting. Right. For sure, right? Because if it was in a different situation where everyone's excited to be there and they're well versed, then he can lean into it or she can lean into it. But she's going to a room here where it's like everyone doesn't want me to be here, so let me just like squeeze the Judaism in without ruffling any feathers, because probably they just want to eat, right? So that person's trying to navigate that tough room by playing it down, and you're saying, be less apologetic, go for the home run. Worst case scenario, someone will find it not meaningful and move on. They always do. But they usually do, and they're kind of giving, I call it chizuk, like strength, like you're giving encouragement for people who are walking. And I've been one of those people also. I get, my friend's friend who doesn't know anyone Jewish in the world has this, is getting married, or, it's like, oh, my cousin's a rabbi, like when someone's a rabbi, let me get him in there for you. And then you always have to navigate, like how special can you make it without them feeling like, whoa, like I didn't sign up for this? I never thought of it. Thank you for saying that, because I never really thought of it, maybe just because I have this specific moil in my brain that, like, he was so sure and he was just doing it, but maybe there is a little bit of that. Like, okay, I don't feel like this is a joyous space, so let me get done as quickly as possible. Right. And I never really thought about it I do think it's always very difficult, because now that I'm not a DJ, and I am very aware of my audience, whether it's a Shabbat dinner or anywhere I'm speaking about JewBelong. And it's hard to know, but I also feel like people don't always tell you how much you've touched their soul. Right. Like, and that you just have to believe, and I really have tried to take this to heart, that like, even the people who don't say anything, they often will maybe reach out later, or maybe they never say, oh yeah, what you said, like, that was me, and I was really glad you said that. And that, and haters gonna, we have these rules online we have them highlighted on Passover, saying to people, if you're gonna lead a Seder, like, there are some people who are gonna be checking their watch, and they're gonna be like, can we hurry up? And I'm really hungry. And first of all, they're not that hungry. Give them a snack, like whatever. And second of all, haters gonna hate. Right. And you cannot, and they're gonna try to take you off your game. Sure. don't let, because everyone else is sitting at the table, and if you're using the JewBelong Haggadah or whatever, if you've done your homework as a Seder leader, you're inspiring them. And you just have to know that. Don't let the haters take you off their game, because they're going to try.
Of course.
But stay strong. Know that there's other people that we're doing God's work. We are inspiring people about Judaism, and that's really important.
Interesting. By the way, the Seder seems like the most extreme example of that, right?
Totally.
Because like a baby naming or a bris, in my parlance, we say that's a layup. That's easy. Like everyone's emotional when a baby's being born, so to lean into that. But when you're saying all these people sit around a table with different levels of knowledge, and I'm going to try to make this meaningful for you, and I want to lean into making it meaningful, even though I know this person, like you said, is checking their watch, and this person is like, why am I here? And or these people have different traditions, all those pieces.
Yep.
That's an especially difficult time. Okay, wait. So I want to. Just before I want to make sure I understand. So you used to have big billboards, so people would call and purchase storage. Now you have big billboards, and the hope there, which is interesting, I know a little bit, but I'm understanding more now, is really not just to catch their eye, but so they'll click through to the website and get resources.
Yeah.
That's really what you're hoping. And then your hope is that, many places have resources, as you know, that are out there. I see already, just looking at the covers of your booklets there, that the resources are a little bit more like your style, catchy. Sorry, 2 questions. One is, who puts the resources together? And because that could be done so differently, obviously, depending on who you ask. And second is the idea that it's like a DIY, that you hope once they have this, they can run with it. They don't need anyone else to help them with it.
So a couple things.
Yeah.
They use the resources exactly like they're on there, and some people personalize them. Some people, use a page of this, and they do it themselves. Other people print it out and use the Haggadah. We're actually selling them on Amazon now. JewBelong's a nonprofit, though. I want to say the whole thing is nonprofit. Gary and I pay for all of the overhead of the entire organization, so that way when people do donate, usually it's for something like a billboard, and so every nickel goes to that. And it is a DIY, but we have a page on the website. It's called the Jello pages, like the yellow pages, but Jello page. And we give all bunch of Jewish organizations. They're all listed there. And it says basically, okay, you're here, thrilled you're here, but Judaism is at its kind of it's a communal or religion.
Right.
So it's very hard to do Jewish alone. You need your people. So we will. So people sometimes will find you name it like Hillel, Birthright, One Table.
For you guys.
They're all linked.
Beautiful.
And people can use us as a conduit for that. And so it's both. And then sometimes people, again, Jewish journeys, they're all different.
Sure.
They may just say, I'm using, all I'm going to do is Passover, and do I want them to do more? Of course I do.
Right.
But maybe that's where they are now, but then they're like, well, I've never had a Seder before and I'm doing it. Maybe I'm going to now look at your Shabbat or doing other things. So it's all there for their taking, and that's really what, And
so now I'm going to get to the question in the back of the room, which I think is interesting, given everything we've spoken about, which is that actually not since October 7th. Most conversations are since October 7th, Before October 7th, you guys, I don't know if you want to use the word shifted, but certainly expanded towards focusing on, what do you call it, fighting anti-Semitism? Is that the language you use?
That's the language.
Great. So tell me about, why do you decide to start fighting anti-Semitism, and how are you doing that?
Because the reason we started is in May of 2021. That was the last big Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And we have a lot of our audience is on Instagram, with social media.
Sure.
And we only exist, just to be very clear. We don't have a building. There's no JewBelong, no JewBelong building. We are online. And I started to see so much anti-Semitism online that it was like, how can I keep only talking about do Shabbat and have fun and enjoy the joys of Judaism when you feel like you have a target on your back.
Sure.
And the thing that really the moment that just remember saying, okay, we got to do something, we got to talk about more than joyous Judaism, which is what we've been talking about up till now, is on Instagram there was some young girl who was saying, I think she was 14, saying, oh, I'm really worried about my cousin. She's the same age, and she had to spend the night in a bomb shelter in Israel. And someone writes back, well, your cousin's like a Zionist murderer. And I was like, wait a second, these are two like little girls in this conversation, and people are calling her, I mean, and it's only gotten worse.
Right,
I
this
mean,
was all before October 7th.
This was
it exploded.
and it was, those who would seek to do us harm were doing an excellent job they were really rebranding the word Zionist, and that was starting back then. So, you know, I know it's one thing to start online, but, you know, we're all sort of slaves to our algorithm. Like, I can put a lot of anti-Semitism work online, but the people who are going to see it, it's algorithm. Like, they're going to be, chances are they're in the circle, it's the echo chamber.
Sure.
We don't need this echo chamber. So billboards get us out of the echo chamber.
Beautiful.
So that's when we said, it was our first ad, our anti-Semitism ad that said, it's been 75 years since the gas chamber, so no, a billboard calling out anti-Semitism is not an overreaction. And that was when we started to go big with the anti-Semitism, and they're pink and white billboards. And
And just on that note, actually, I was wondering before, the Joyous Judaism stuff, were you focusing on markets with large Jewish populations, and then for the anti-Semitism stuff, or I assume you're expanding into
everybody? Thank you for pointing that out. They are two different target audiences. The Joyous Judaism, I'm looking for the DJs, and the chances are it's where the Jewish people live.
Right.
And whereas the anti-Semitism, it is across the whole country. We've been in 33 states.
Wow.
So far. We've had over 800 billboards. And we are now, I'll tell you more about it, but we're just started to collaborate with a Christian organization, because we need, I'll say this, out of the echo chamber, Jews are 2% of the country.
Right.
We can't fight this battle alone.
Wow.
And we've been.
How's that been?
You mean it's been lonely?
Working with Christians. Yeah,
the Christian organization is amazing. It was, I met her name is Patricia Heaton. She was the mom in Everybody Loves Raymond.
Okay.
And I met her I was at Columbia at a rally, and she was there too. And I told her what she'd seen JewBelong before.
Sure.
And I said, she'd started an organization called October 7th Coalition. And I said, can we, work together? And she said, yes. And so now she's on the billboards and we're on the billboards, and they say things like, you don't need to be a Jew to protect Jews. And anti-Semitism is bad for America. So it's a broader, so it's really, and it's so much, it's just better than having to go it alone, because again, there's not enough of us. Even if every Jew, which we know they're not, is not speaking up, it's not enough. So I'm really excited about that.
Okay, so I'll ask you my question from before for the third time now, which is...
I'm sorry.
No, I didn't mean because you didn't answer it.
Oh.
I mean because it's on a new topic. I apologize.
Okay.
First we said we want you to buy storage, right? Then we said we want you to pick up your Haggadah magazine.
Yes.
So now we have a billboard about anti-Semitism. What are you hoping happens when someone sees that billboard? And how do you judge success?
Okay, it's a great question. A lot of it is awareness. Okay, and I'm going to compare it to Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movements. I don't care, by the way, what people think about either one of those movements.
Sure.
What they both did is they made BLM. They kept saying Black Lives Matter until this country had a discussion about race in America. And it was awareness, okay? And that is really important. So we need to make people aware of anti-Semitism before it's going to get better. People still don't know enough, like the word anti-Semitism. Sure. We sometimes use the word Jew hate instead, because now more people do know anti-Semitism because it's been in the news. So a lot of it is really just awareness. And people say, I saw your billboards. Again, I'm going mostly, I'm interested in the Jewish audience, but I'm very interested in the non-Jewish audience. And so it's to be aware. They can also go on, if they want to take it a step further, that might be enough, by the way. That's just it. Oh yeah, I saw those billboards about anti-Semitism. It made me aware. Most people are not anti-Semitic. Most of the country's not, but they're not thinking about it. It's like Asian hate. Remember when Asian hate was it was a really big thing during COVID, and it's like most people don't hate Asian people, but like when I saw billboards about Asian hate, I was like, oh, that's actually really important. Like, this country is talking about, all sorts of rights for Black people and Asian people and transgender people. And like, Jews are left off. We're not even on the playing field some of the
Right.
time. So what the billboards do is they get us on the playing field. They make people have the discussion, or at least getting into their brain. For the people who want to know more, they'll go on to the website. We have what we call the JewBelong cheat sheet, the anti-Semitism cheat sheet. And they can read it. It's a very quick, like, here, is anti-Semitism the same as anti-Zionism? Lots of different, what are tropes? And then we also send them to other websites that I think are doing much more deep dives. Because there's people whose their whole organization is all about anti-Semitism, and they want to know a lot. I think sometimes the Jewish community, we suffer a little bit from thinking that everybody wants to know everything. It's like, well, let me tell you about 1948, and let me tell you about the peace.
Sure.
And most people, many people have the attention span of a flea. And it's like, I don't want to know all that. I just want to know, I like that's I don't mean to be an anti-Semite. I just it's a problem. Okay. I care, and I just care, but they're not going to read the articles and the books and watching the documentaries on anti-Semitism. I don't mean to roll my eyes. I think they're all important, but I think we need to be serious about who is watching so many of the Jewish information that is being put forward, and it's usually Jewish people. And that's not the problem.
Okay, so now I'm going to bring the Dara Horn question, if that makes sense for you.
Sure.
Right, so I'm attributing it to her because at least that's how I was exposed to her question, which was, I guess People Love Dead Jews, I think is the name of her book, and the idea that sometimes all this talk of anti-Semitism can make it worse instead of better. The idea that, like you said, they don't have the time to read, so if the one thing they know about Jews is that they're under attack, instead of all the wonderful things to know about Jews, does that how do you, from where you're sitting, how do you know? I think one answer you offered was that if it reaches a level of public conversation where people are doing something about it. But I think how do we know that you've shifted resources where instead of people being thinking funny things that excite them about the Seder, you're adding resources that are people are oh, I should be worried that people are trying to kill Jews. So how do we know that's not? I say one more time, I think there's talk of Biden passing some sort of anti-Semitism law.
Right.
And I had a colleague say to me earlier this week, I don't want that to happen. It's bad. I don't want that to happen. I don't want the story, the narrative of the Jewish people to be that they are victims or that we need to explain why people shouldn't hate them, because then the assumption is that people should hate them. How do you grapple with the potential, what's the word, bad that can come from trying to spread information about anti-Semitism?
So we saw this movie back in the 1930s in Europe, and we know what happens when Jews don't fight. Mm-hmm. I don't mean to be blaming the people in the Holocaust. I hope no one thinks about that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there is a certain let's not say anything and let's just this will pass. It's not going to pass. People want to be on a winning team. They're you guys are fighting? Amazing. What are we going to do? How are we going to speak out? It is outrageous what is happening now to Jewish students, to Jews in general, but campuses are so easy to focus on because they're hotbeds.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so outrageous that to not fight back with every ounce of who we are, I think is going to be, I think it's really going to test who we are. When I look back, one of our billboards said, I need to tell my children I did not stay silent. And I believe that in my core, I assume someday, I don't have grandchildren yet, but God willing, I'll have grandchildren. I'm assuming they might say, what were you doing in 2024
right,
when everything was spiraling for the Jewish community? And I'm going to tell them. And I think every Jewish person should think about what are they going to tell their grandchildren they were doing when we were living in this horrible time right now. And it better be a good answer. Mm-hmm. It can't be oh, I don't know, I was waiting for it to pass because, I don't know.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that history, it can be a good barometer of what might happen. And I don't see our enemies backing off by those who
Great.
are quiet.
Right, and I think you're saying don't be silent, and not being silent means raising awareness of the dangers of anti-Semitism. Which I think totally makes sense. Let's push now to the resources question, which I think is a really important question in this, right? So, we didn't get into the details of whether you took funding away, let's say, from Jewish Judaism and focused on anti-Semitism, but certainly since October 7th and before, we saw kind of, I think probably the two most famous examples are Mark Rowan and Robert Kraft, probably, right? Mark Rowan kind of starting this we need to take Jewish money away from these schools that are creating anti-Semitism on campus.
Yeah.
And Robert Kraft, starting with the blue pin, and a Super Bowl ad, which was expensive, and really spending resources on this. And I think, I have friends who are teachers in day schools that are like, I wish these people would take this money and make it fun. Middle school Jewish teachers, so people could have a Jewish education. They're spending all their money on, trying to stop anti-Semitism. I don't know if it's going to be successful, and we're missing so much on resources. Another way of asking it is, I have friends on college campuses, the same thing. If suddenly you're spending your whole year fighting back against protests,
right, and
you're not getting kids to come to Shabbat table or Shabbat dinner because you're using all your resources to.
I understand.
Right. So. Excuse me again. So how do you think through? I mean, you had it yourself, right? You were using all your energies on Jewish Judaism, and now it's like, no, we have to do this other thing in a different state, by the way. How do you think through that balance of educating people about Judaism? And by the way, not just Jews, also non-Jews, right?
Yep.
Like if the one thing, right? Go.
I look at it like it is. Someone said to me, "Oh, so you're not doing Jewish Judaism anymore?" I was like, absolutely, that's so false.
Right.
Like if you don't know what you're fighting for.
Yeah.
Then you're going to be a terrible. You're not going to be a good soldier. Okay, we need good soldiers. And if it's like, yeah, well, Judaism doesn't mean anything to me. I get it. Those people who say that, like, Judaism doesn't mean anything to me. What do I need to fight back for? Like, that's terrible. So I hold my hand up because it's two sides of the same coin. It's like, yeah, we need to fight because that's what the world has asked us to do right now. And you got to know what you're fighting for. You're fighting for everything. You're fighting for the soul of this, of who you are and your, our history and what we're going to leave behind us in Judaism. So it is like that. It is so important to keep the joyous Judaism and balance it. That I've been kind of excited in that this horrible time that there have been I call them October 8th Jews. Mm-hmm. Those are the people who are like, yeah, I never did, no Jewish education, but I can't stop thinking about October 7th. I know I know every hostage, I know where they are, like everything in those. So I think our job is to sort of say, okay, great, like what JewBelong is doing, say, I'm so glad you're here. I'm sorry it took a tragedy to bring you, but like you've woken up. Let's bring you in, and wherever you feel like this fits for you. The joy of the Judaism. Mm-hmm. And the resources question. I think that, as I said, we're a nonprofit, and I want to clarify something. I said that our booklets can be available on Amazon. They're only paying what Amazon charges. JewBelong doesn't make any. I mean, you can also download it and take it to Staples. For all I care, you can. It's free. Right. It's just that
Amazon binds it.
Exactly, and then they charge what they charge, but you can use your own printer. Sometimes what happens with, I think it's so important to meet this moment, mm-hmm. and this moment is going to be, in some way, reflective of how the Jewish community explains that this is not acceptable, what's going on, and I think, and that is a way to, and that's going to be awareness, and is going to be big, and it is expensive. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the right thing. I've never heard Hebrew school, day schools say that, okay, we've got plenty of money, we don't need any more anyway. Right. So they're going to always need it. So I don't
come from a family of funding Jewish education. You're like, we tried, it didn't work.
We don't need. There's always going to be a lack of resources in some areas. I get that. I think that for the Jewish community to not fight boldly, if we can do it with allies doing it, it is really important. And it's interesting. And also, I'm sensitive to a donor might say, I want to put a billboard campaign in Boston. Real example. And this donor, that's what she wanted. And does she want to be doing with Joyous Judaism? No, she wanted to do that. So sometimes we follow the lead of what a donor is interested in doing. And
that's a double-edged sword, of course, also, because we see that here on JBS as well. Like, we have a show with ISGAP, the Anti-Semitism Hour. So there's people that want to see and learn about anti-Semitism. We have a show on defending Israel as well. I think there's deep interest in those areas. But you could also imagine a world where people are watching, certainly post-October 7th, just reading up about tragedy all day, every day, and keeping track of which celebrity said this and didn't say that, and suddenly, like, they're not thinking about preparing for Passover anymore. And I know they're not the same thing, but you're taking attention away from all the wonderful things, the treasures you started talking about, the meaningful baby naming, all those things, and now you're not as focused on those because there's an obsession with each person needs to be a soldier in fighting anti-Semitism, and there's less of each person needs to be a soldier in growing Jewish identity, let's say.
Oh no, I think people can do
both.
100%. You got to be able to do both.
Right.
And people are multifaceted, and they can. And
But I would argue that, like, certainly in certain circles, that's like what Judaism became over the past 50 years, which is like, your Judaism is like, you're going to march on Washington, D.C. for civil rights or something like that. Yeah. And it's very far from Shabbat or Passover or, all the things that you're writing about there, that people kind of felt like worrying about politics and expressing things on politics is how I do Judaism. And then, like, all the beautiful things that you're in the family.
Like, that made me crazy. Like, people sometimes say, well, like, I'm Jewish because I, fight for women's rights. I'm like,
right.
You're not Jewish. You're a social activist. Right. That's not Jew. I mean, you might be Jewish.
It's an expression of a piece of Judaism.
But it's not like this obsession that sometimes Jews have with, like, tikkun olam, and I don't mean like It makes me nuts. Like, right now, especially now, when people are still giving money to organizations that are not Jewish. You asked about Mark Rowan. I don't know where he's giving all of his philanthropy, but, like, it makes me crazy. I mean, when I see people, I'm like, you're still giving to the art museum? Like, are you nuts? Like, what do they have to do to show you that, you're not respected, and you, like, pull your freaking money? Or if you're going to give it, then, like, have strings attached and say, you must have X number of Israeli artists or X number of Jewish, like, something. I think the Jewish community could stand up a lot. We're very philanthropic, many people, and, like, their dollars could be a lot stronger with, could say more. And I'm really surprised sometimes when I see people just still like giving to organizations that, like, spoke pretty loudly by not saying anything after October 7th. And that's
the culture. Okay. I'm giving you a 10-second answer. This is a lightning question.
Okay.
You get the call from Robert Kraft. He wants you to be in charge of the Super Bowl ad. What are you going to do with your Super Bowl ad?
Oh my gosh,
You have the whole world watching. What do you want to tell them?
It's really about,
It's a good question.
It's a really, really good question. Hold on a second. It's going to be about both Jewish pride and standing up for Jews who have been. We're an important people. We're a small people. We punch way above our weight. Yeah. I'm not going to say that in the ad, by the way, because that'll piss people off. And just that there is absolutely, we will not stand for treatment of people that we would never stand for treatment of, and that we wouldn't stand for anybody else. And the world has to wake up, and anti-Semitism will hurt this entire country if we don't fight it right now.
Beautiful, thank you. As I said at the beginning, I'm really so inspired because I think the goal of life is to just know what you're working with and apply it to serve, and that's exactly what you're doing. You've developed these skills and you're using it to help the Jewish people and to help America and the world. So Archie, thank you so much for being here, and it's really been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really have enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.